The morning light crept slowly across the quiet street, turning the dust in the air into soft gold. Inside the small wooden workshop, the familiar sounds of routine filled the space, the gentle scrape of sandpaper, the low hum of an old radio, the steady rhythm of a man beginning another ordinary day. Then he noticed something different. Just outside the open doorway, a dog was sitting perfectly still. Not pacing. Not begging. Just sitting, as if the spot had been chosen carefully. The dog didn't bark or move when the man glanced up. Its posture was calm, almost deliberate, eyes fixed gently on the workshop interior. There was no urgency in its body, only patience. Purpose. A quiet certainty that felt strangely intentional. The man paused his work. He had seen many dogs wander past before, but this one felt present. As though it wasn't lost, or waiting for food, or passing time. It was waiting for something. He stepped closer, expecting the dog to flinch or wander away. It didn't. Instead, the dog's tail moved once, slow and measured, and its gaze softened, as if recognizing him. That small moment stirred something unexpected in the man's chest. A warmth. A curiosity he couldn't explain. Minutes passed. The dog remained. Customers came and went down the street. The radio changed songs. Still, the dog stayed seated in the same place, watching, listening, sensing. The man felt it then, that this wasn't coincidence. That the dog wasn't simply resting. Whatever had drawn the dog to his workshop carried meaning. And what the dog sensed would quietly begin to change everything. The morning began the way it always did. Soft light filtered through the tall front window of the workshop, dust drifting slowly in the air, wooden shelves lined with tools worn smooth by years of use. Ethan Caldwell stood at his workbench, sleeves rolled up, hands steady as he sanded the edge of a small wooden drawer. The motion was familiar. Comforting. Almost meditative. The old radio on the shelf hummed quietly, a low, warm voice drifting through static, a song from another decade. Outside, the street was calm. No traffic yet. No voices. Just the distant sound of a delivery truck somewhere far away. Ethan liked mornings like this. They didn't ask questions. They didn't rush him. They simply existed. He paused for a moment, set the sandpaper down, and reached for his coffee. That's when he noticed it. Something, or someone, sitting just beyond the open doorway. At first, he thought it was a shadow. Then it moved. A dog. Medium-sized. Golden brown coat catching the early light. Sitting directly in front of the workshop entrance, as if the spot had been chosen carefully. Not wandering. Not sniffing around. Just sitting. Ethan frowned slightly, more curious than alarmed. Dogs passed through the neighborhood all the time. Most were strays. Most didn't linger. This one hadn't made a sound. No barking. No scratching. No restless shifting. Just stillness. He wiped his hands on a rag and took a step closer to the doorway. The dog didn't move. Its posture was upright but relaxed, tail resting gently against the ground, ears alert, but calm. Its eyes met his. Not wide. Not fearful. Focused. As if it had been waiting for him to notice. Ethan felt something subtle stir in his chest. A strange warmth, mixed with an unfamiliar sense of being seen. "Well," he said softly, mostly to himself. "Where did you come from?" The dog tilted its head slightly. "Just once." No sound followed. Ethan chuckled under his breath. "Guess you're not much for conversation." He expected the dog to stand up, maybe wander off, or at least shift closer. It did none of those things. Instead, its tail moved once. Slow. Measured. Almost deliberate. Ethan straightened. That small motion felt different than he expected. Not excitement. Not nervousness. Recognition. He glanced down the street. No owner calling. no leash trailing behind. "Lost?" he asked gently. The dog's gaze didn't break from him. That was when Ethan noticed something else. The dog wasn't looking at him exactly. It was looking past him. Into the workshop. Into the space. Into the quiet. As if the building itself mattered. Ethan stepped aside slightly, opening the doorway a bit wider. The dog didn't cross the threshold. It stayed where it was. Patient. Waiting. Minutes passed. Ethan returned to his bench, picked up the sandpaper, tried to focus. But his eyes kept drifting back. The dog remained. The radio changed songs. Sunlight shifted across the floor. A neighbor's car rolled by outside. Still, the dog stayed seated in the same place. Something about it unsettled him. Not in a bad way. In a thoughtful way. He remembered mornings long ago, when silence had meant something different. When presence mattered more than words. Ethan sighed softly, set his tools down again, and walked back to the doorway. Up close, the dog's coat showed signs of age. A few lighter hairs around the muzzle. Paws sturdy, well-worn. Not young. Experienced. "You've been around, haven't you?" he murmured. The dog blinked slowly. A calm blink. Ethan crouched down, keeping his distance. Hungry? No reaction. Thirsty? Nothing. The dog wasn't here for food. That much was clear. Ethan felt a gentle pressure behind his ribs, a pull he couldn't explain. It had been a long time since anything had made him stop like this. A long time since something had asked him to notice. He sat down on the step, hands resting on his knees, and waited. Across from him, the dog waited too. Two quiet figures, sharing a moment that didn't need words. Whatever had brought this dog here, whatever it sensed, whatever it was waiting for. Ethan knew one thing. This wasn't coincidence. And this morning, this ordinary, peaceful morning, had just changed direction. The dog was still there when the morning wore on. Ethan noticed at the moment he returned from the back room, a box of spare hinges tucked under his arm, the smell of sawdust clinging to his shirt. Same spot. Same posture. Sitting just outside the doorway, like a quiet marker placed there on purpose. He checked his watch. Nearly an hour had passed. Most dogs would have wandered off by now. Chased a sound. Followed a scent. This one hadn't moved more than an inch. Ethan set the box down slowly. "You're really committed to that spot, huh?" The dog's ears flicked once. That was all. No shift of the body. No step forward. Just awareness. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, arms folded loosely, and studied the dog the way he studied wood grain. Patiently. Carefully. The dog's breathing was slow and steady. Not shallow. Not anxious. Calm. Its gaze moved occasionally, following Ethan's hands, the motion of tools, the way light changed inside the workshop. As if it were taking everything in. A customer walked past outside. Then another. Neither stopped. Neither noticed. The dog didn't look at them. It didn't look anywhere but the workshop. Ethan felt a soft tightening in his chest. "You're not here by accident, are you?" The words came out quieter than he intended. The dog's tail brushed the ground once again. Slow. Intentional. Ethan exhaled. There had been a time in his life when he believed in signs. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just, gently. Back then, he paid attention to small things. To moments that lingered longer than they should. He hadn't done that in years. The bell above the workshop door chimed. Ethan turned. Mrs. Larkin stood in the doorway, thin frame, floral scarf, a familiar smile. "Morning, Ethan." "Morning," he replied. Her eyes drifted downward. "Well, who's this?" Ethan followed her gaze. Found him sitting there, he said. Hasn't moved all morning. Mrs. Larkin crouched slightly, hands on her knees. Well, aren't you a polite one, she said warmly. The dog didn't budge. Didn't flinch. Didn't lean in. Just watched. Mrs. Larkin chuckled. Must be waiting for you. Ethan smiled faintly. I don't think so. Oh, I do, she said. Dogs know things. She straightened, glanced at Ethan. Anyway, just dropping off the lamp. Take your time. The bell chimed again as she left. The dog remained. Ethan felt that strange pull again. Waiting. The morning stretched on. Ethan worked, paused, worked again. Each time he looked up, the dog was still there. As if time passed differently for it. At noon, Ethan stepped outside with a bowl of water. He placed it gently on the ground, a few feet away. The dog glanced at the bowl. Then back at Ethan. It didn't move. You sure? Ethan asked softly. No response. He placed a small piece of bread nearby. Nothing. That confirmed it. The dog wasn't hungry. Wasn't thirsty. Wasn't tired. It was present. Ethan sat on the step again, the sun now warmer on his shoulders. You can come in, you know. The dog didn't cross the line. Instead, it lowered itself slightly, resting its chest closer to the ground, still seated, still facing the doorway. Settling. As if saying, I'll wait right here. Ethan swallowed. There was something deeply respectful about that. Not pushing. Not demanding. Just choosing to stay. He noticed the dog's collar then. Worn leather. No tags. Faded. Soft from years of use. Someone had cared for this dog once. Maybe still did. Ethan reached out slowly, stopping well short of touching. The dog didn't recoil. Its eyes softened, not pleading, just open. That look stirred something old inside Ethan. A memory he hadn't visited in a long time. Someone sitting quietly nearby, saying nothing, yet offering everything. He pulled his hand back gently. Okay, he said quietly. I hear you. The words surprised him. The dog blinked. Slow. Calm. Acknowledging. The afternoon breeze rustled the trees down the street. A wind chime rang somewhere nearby. Still, the dog stayed. And Ethan realized something important. The dog wasn't waiting for permission. It wasn't waiting for food. It wasn't even waiting for him to act. It was waiting because this place mattered. Because something here mattered. And that thought, that quiet certainty, settled into Ethan's chest like a warm weight. This dog wasn't lost. It had arrived. By the third day, the dog was no longer a surprise. Ethan unlocked the workshop just after sunrise, pushed the door open, and smiled faintly. The dog was already there. Same place. Same quiet posture. Sitting just beyond the threshold, as if the morning had been waiting with it. Well, Ethan said softly, setting his keys down, guess you beat me again. The dog's tail moved once. That slow, familiar motion. Ethan noticed how natural it felt now, this silent greeting, this shared start to the day. Inside, the workshop filled with gentle sounds. The click of the light switch. The low hum of the radio warming up. Wood shifting as the building woke? The dog listened. Ethan caught himself glancing over more often than usual. Not because he was worried the dog would leave, but because part of him wanted to understand. Curiosity crept in quietly. He began noticing details. The way the dog's ears lifted when certain sounds came from inside the shop, the way its gaze softened when Ethan laughed at something on the radio, the way it seemed especially attentive during the quieter moments. As if silence mattered. Mid-morning, Ethan pulled an old stool closer to the doorway. He sat down, coffee mug warming his hands, and simply watched. "You're very serious about this," he murmured. The dog's eyes met his. Focused. Present. Not expectant. Ethan thought of all the dogs he'd known growing up. Restless. Playful. Always asking for something. This one asked for nothing. And that made him lean in instead of pull away. "You remind me of someone," he said quietly. The words surprised him. The dog tilted its head. Ethan hesitated. "I used to know someone who could sit for hours," he continued, voice low. "Didn't need to talk. Didn't need answers." He swallowed. "They just stayed." The dog didn't blink. Didn't shift. It stayed. Ethan let the silence stretch. In that quiet, memories began surfacing gently. Long afternoons. A presence nearby. The comfort of not being alone, without needing to explain anything. He shook his head slightly. "Funny what comes back to you," he said. Later that day, a delivery arrived. The truck rumbled up the street, loud and abrupt. Ethan glanced toward the dog. Still calm. Still seated. But its posture changed. Just slightly. More alert. Its eyes tracked the truck, then flicked back to Ethan, as if checking something. Ethan noticed. That was new. "You watching out for me?" he asked. The dog's tail moved. "Once." Ethan laughed softly. He finished signing for the package, dragged the box inside, and paused. The dog hadn't followed. It never did. Always close enough to see, never crossing that invisible line. That restraint stayed with him. Later, during lunch, Ethan brought out a chair and sat beside the dog. Not facing it. Beside it. He unwrapped his sandwich, took a bite, then rested his elbows on his knees. The dog's gaze stayed forward. They sat like that for several minutes. Not interacting. Sharing space. "You know," Ethan said slowly, "I used to hate quiet." The dog's ear flicked. "I thought it meant something was wrong." He exhaled. "Now I think, it just means something hasn't rushed in yet." The breeze moved through the street, lifting a few dry leaves, carrying the faint smell of coffee from somewhere nearby. The dog breathed steadily. Ethan felt his shoulders relax. At some point, without realizing when, his work slowed. Not because he was distracted, but because he didn't feel the need to rush. He found himself working more carefully. More intentionally. Pausing between tasks. Listening. And each time he did, the dog seemed to notice. Its attention sharpened during those pauses. As if those moments mattered most. That evening, as Ethan locked up, he hesitated. "You'll be back tomorrow?" he asked quietly. The dog looked up at him. Held his gaze. No sound. No movement. Just that steady presence. Ethan nodded to himself. "Yeah," he said. "Me too." As he walked home, the workshop behind him quiet again, he realized something subtle but important. The dog wasn't changing his routine by force. It was inviting him, gently, to slow down enough to see what had always been there. And for the first time in a long while, Ethan felt curious again. Not about the dog alone, but about himself. The bond didn't arrive all at once. It formed the way light moves across a room, slowly, almost unnoticed, until one day you realize everything feels warmer. By the end of the week, Ethan no longer wondered if the dog would be there. He expected it. Each morning, before unlocking the workshop, he glanced down the street. And there it was. Sitting. Waiting. Same place. Same calm posture. As if time itself respected that spot. "Morning," Ethan said one day, barely louder than a breath. The dog's tail brushed the ground. That was enough. Inside, the workshop seemed to adjust to the dog's presence. Ethan left the door open longer. Let the light spill farther across the floor. The radio stayed softer, almost secondary to the quiet. He noticed something else too. The dog had started responding to him. Not commands. Not gestures. Moments. When Ethan sighed deeply, the dog lifted its head. When he laughed at a memory, the dog's ears relaxed. When his hands trembled slightly while holding a piece of old wood, the dog leaned forward just a fraction. It never crossed the threshold. But it leaned. One afternoon, Ethan brought out a small cushion. He placed it gently near the doorway. "You don't have to sit on the ground," he said. The dog looked at the cushion. Then at Ethan. Then, carefully, it adjusted its position. Still outside. Still facing in. But closer. Ethan's chest tightened. "Okay," he whispered. "That's okay." He didn't touch the dog. Not yet. The restraint felt important. Like a conversation that didn't need words. That evening, rain began falling without warning. Soft at first. Then steadier. Ethan rushed to move some tools inside, then stopped. The dog was still there. Rain dotted its fur, darkening the golden-brown coat, yet it didn't move away. Ethan grabbed an old awning extension, pulled it down carefully. "You can stay dry," he said. The dog looked up at him. For the first time, its eyes held something new. Gratitude. Ethan swallowed. "Yeah," he murmured. "Me too." The rain slowed. They stayed like that for a long time. Two figures framed by the doorway, one inside, one just outside, sharing shelter without crossing lines. Over the next few days, the bond deepened in quiet ways. Ethan began talking more. Not conversations. Fragments. "Didn't think this would take so long, used to love mornings like this, funny how things circle back." The dog listened. Always. Sometimes Ethan felt foolish, speaking into the quiet. But the dog's attention never wavered. That made all the difference. One morning, Ethan dropped a tool. The clatter echoed sharply. The dog flinched, just slightly. Then steadied. Its gaze returned to Ethan. "Checking. You okay?" Ethan asked automatically. The dog's tail moved. Once. Ethan laughed quietly. "Guess that answers that." That laugh stayed with him. He realized it had been a while since laughter came easily. Not forced. Not polite. Just present. Near sunset one evening, Ethan finally did it. He reached out. Slowly. Palm open. Stopping short, giving space. The dog leaned forward. Just enough for Ethan's fingers to brush its fur. Warm. Real. The dog didn't pull away. Didn't press closer either. It simply allowed the touch. Ethan's breath caught. "That's nice," he whispered. He didn't touch again. Didn't want to rush the moment. But something had shifted. A line had been crossed, gently, together. As dusk settled, the workshop lights glowed warmly behind them. Ethan locked up for the night, then paused. "You'll be here tomorrow?" he asked softly. The dog looked up. Eyes steady. Patient. As if the answer was already known. Ethan nodded. "Good," he said. As he walked away, he felt lighter. Not because anything dramatic had changed, but because something steady had arrived. A presence. A rhythm. A bond that didn't demand, didn't rush, didn't explain itself. It simply grew. The mornings began to feel different. Ethan noticed patterns he hadn't seen before. Small gestures. Tiny signals. A tilt of the dog's head. A shift in weight. A glance toward something beyond the workshop. It wasn't random. It was intention. One Tuesday, while sanding a wooden panel, Ethan paused. A shadow moved across the floor. He looked up. The dog was alert. Ears pricked. Eyes fixed on the far corner of the workshop. Ethan frowned. Nothing was there. Just light falling across the shelves, dust motes dancing in quiet. "You see something?" he asked softly. The dog blinked slowly. Calm. Knowing. Ethan shook his head and returned to his work. But over the next hour, he realized he had been glancing at that corner more than once. Noticing details he'd never considered before, the slight misalignment of a shelf, the tiny crack in the wood, the subtle play of sunlight across tools. The dog had shifted his attention. Not with force. Not with noise. Simply, by being present. By late afternoon, Ethan brought a small chair outside and sat near the doorway. The dog rested on the ground, just a few feet away. They shared space and silence. "You know," Ethan said quietly, "you have a way of noticing things." The dog's eyes met his. Focused. Connected. That evening, a breeze rustled through the street, carrying the faint scent of freshly cut grass. Ethan hummed softly, thinking of nothing in particular. The dog's gaze softened. It was watching him now, not the world outside. Moments stretched. The light shifted. The dog moved slightly closer, still outside, still patient, but its chest rose and fell with a steady rhythm. Ethan felt the weight of that attention, gentle but undeniable. He realized then that the dog wasn't just observing the workshop. It was observing him. Not critically. Not demanding. Just noticing. Responding. A small warmth settled in Ethan's chest. He hadn't realized how much he'd missed that quiet attention, someone or something simply being there. As the sun dipped lower, casting long golden shadows across the street, Ethan reached out again. This time, he rested his hand lightly on the dog's head. The dog leaned into the touch slightly, just enough to acknowledge it without moving closer. A soft sigh escaped Ethan's lips. A feeling of understanding passed between them. No words were necessary. None would ever be. The dog had shown him something subtle, something he hadn't expected, that presence could speak louder than action, and that silent understanding could touch hearts in ways words never could. Ethan stood slowly, brushing his hands against his pants. "You've changed my mornings," he whispered. The dog tilted its head. Tail flicked once. Calm. Content. Connected. And in that gentle, quiet exchange, Ethan felt the first real stirrings of hope he hadn't known he'd lost. By now, the rhythm of their mornings had become a quiet ritual. Ethan would arrive, unlock the door, and find the dog waiting. Sitting. Watching. Present. And each day, he felt a little lighter, a little more attentive, a little more open to moments he used to rush past. One Thursday, the sun had just begun to lift over the rooftops. Golden light spilled across the workshop floor, warm and soft. Ethan carried a stack of freshly cut wooden panels, the scent of pine and varnish thick in the air. The dog shifted slightly as he passed, following the motion with a careful gaze. Not anxious. Not insistent. Just aware. Ethan set the panels down and wiped his hands on his apron. He noticed that a small scrap of paper pinned to the bulletin board he hadn't seen before. A note. Faded handwriting. Something about a message he had missed, decades old. He frowned. The dog's ears twitched. Its head tilted ever so slightly toward the corner of the wall, eyes locked, silent. Ethan blinked. And then, almost without thinking, he walked over. Picked up the note. Read it slowly. Memories surfaced, long buried, soft, and tender. A time of laughter. A time of care. A time when mornings didn't feel empty. The dog nudged the edge of his sandal lightly, as if to remind him, stay present. Ethan exhaled, leaning against the wall. "This is why you're here, isn't it?" he murmured. The dog looked up. Eyes steady. Connected. patient. Tears pricked at the corners of Ethan's eyes, unbidden. Not from sadness, not exactly. But from a gentle, overwhelming sense of being seen. Of being held. Of being guided back to something he hadn't realized he'd lost. He crouched slowly beside the dog, hand resting lightly on its back. The warmth of fur against his palm grounded him. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to simply feel. The day moved slowly. Tools clinked. Light shifted across the room. Dust motes danced in golden streams. Every sound seemed amplified, not harshly, but softly, like the world itself was breathing around him. The dog remained by the doorway, alert but calm. Watching. Waiting. Guiding. Ethan realized then, the dog hadn't just arrived to sit outside a workshop. It had arrived to help him remember how to live in the quiet. To notice. To care. To connect. A soft breeze drifted through the open door, carrying the smell of rain from the street, the faint sweetness of nearby flowers. Ethan took a deep breath. And in that moment, something shifted entirely. He smiled quietly. "You've done more than you know," he whispered. The dog's tail moved once. Slow. Measured. Affirming. A gentle understanding settled between them. Not spoken. Not rushed. But deeply felt. And in that quiet, golden hour, Ethan finally understood, the dog wasn't just a companion. It was a mirror, showing him the best parts of himself he'd almost forgotten. The following morning, Ethan arrived at the workshop earlier than usual. The sky was soft with dawn, streaked with pale pinks and golds. A gentle mist lingered along the street, curling around lampposts and tree trunks. He unlocked the door, carrying a toolbox, and immediately noticed the dog. It was closer to the entrance this time, sitting tall, ears pricked, eyes fixed on him. Not impatient. Not demanding. Simply ready. Ethan set the toolbox down and crouched slightly. "You've been waiting for something, haven't you?" he asked softly. The dog blinked slowly. Tail lifted slightly, then settled. For a moment, the street was silent except for the distant hum of a passing car. The wind lifted a few leaves, brushing them along the sidewalk. And then the dog moved. Not rushing. Not leaving the spot. Just stepping forward, a few careful paces, and stopping at the edge of a wooden crate by the doorway. Ethan followed its gaze. Inside the crate, partially hidden under a cloth, lay a small, worn blanket. He recognized it immediately. His chest tightened. It had been years since he had seen it. The blanket his daughter had left behind when she moved across the country, the one she always carried to keep her comfort near. The dog rested its chin gently on the crate. Ethan knelt, running a hand over the blanket, feeling the frayed edges and soft fabric. The realization came slowly, like sunlight through a fogged window. This dog, this patient, quiet, attentive dog, had sensed what Ethan had been carrying without realizing it, the weight of absence, the hollow spaces in his mornings, the longing for connection. Tears pricked at his eyes. But they were not sadness. Not exactly. They were relief. Recognition. Gratitude. "You brought this back to me," he whispered, voice trembling slightly. The dog lifted its head, eyes meeting his. No bark. No jump. No display. Just a steady, knowing gaze. Ethan felt warmth spread through his chest. A healing energy he hadn't experienced in years. The dog had been waiting, not for food, not for comfort, not for routine, but to guide him back to something lost and precious. He gently lifted the blanket, folding it with care. "This was always meant to be here," he murmured. The dog watched patiently, tail swaying softly with each subtle movement. Hours seemed to stretch and shrink at the same time. The workshop hummed with quiet life, each tool and shadow now imbued with significance. Ethan realized that every glance, every pause, every silent gesture from the dog over the past days had been leading him to this moment. He knelt beside the dog and placed a hand on its head. Soft. Steady. gentle. You knew, didn't you? He whispered. The dog leaned slightly into his hand. Acknowledging. Connected. That evening, as golden hour bathed the street in warm light, Ethan sat on the workshop steps. The dog at his side. Blanket safely tucked inside. And for the first time in years, he felt truly whole. Because now he understood. The dog had waited, for him to notice. For him to see. For him to feel again. And in that quiet revelation, everything changed. The next morning felt different. The sun rose slowly over the street, spilling golden light across the workshop. Ethan unlocked the door with a soft click, carrying nothing but his hands tucked into his pockets. He didn't need to check. The dog was already there. Sitting. Waiting. Calm. Eyes bright, attentive, gentle. Ethan smiled. Good morning, he said quietly, stepping onto the threshold. The dog's tail moved once, slow, measured, welcoming. Inside, the workshop hummed with warmth. Dust particles danced in the sunlight, floating lazily around tools and unfinished projects. Everything felt soft. Alive. Safe. For the first time, Ethan didn't feel the weight of absence pressing on him. The blanket lay neatly folded on a chair, a symbol of what had been restored. Not just an object, but a memory, a connection, a part of him that had been waiting to return. He crouched down beside the dog, hand brushing its fur. The dog leaned into the touch, just enough to share the warmth. No rush. No insistence. Only presence. Ethan exhaled. A slow, steady breath. The kind that fills your chest and spills out in quiet peace. Thank you, he whispered. For the first time in a long time, he felt gratitude not just for the small things, but for the way life had quietly unfolded. For the patient, silent guidance that had led him here. For the gentle companionship that had reminded him how to see, how to feel, how to be present. He stood slowly, glancing around the workshop. Everything glowed in warm light. Every tool, every shadow, every corner seemed imbued with meaning. The dog followed his movement with calm eyes. Then, without hesitation, it stepped inside the threshold. Just once. Careful. Confident. It wasn't crossing a line. It was choosing to stay. Ethan laughed softly, the sound warm and free. You're home now, he said. The dog settled at his feet. They sat together, quiet, connected. Outside, the street moved on. Neighbors passed. Birds chirped. The world continued. But inside the workshop, inside the gentle golden light, time slowed. Healing had arrived. And a bond, patient and true, had taken root. Ethan looked down at the dog. Eyes meeting. Heart meeting heart. Whatever had begun as a simple act of waiting had become so much more. Presence. Understanding. Connection. A story of quiet love, of patience, of discovery. And in that warm, golden moment, Ethan knew. Life had changed. Softly, gently. Forever.